Rain beat gently against the city windows as Milo Ramirez leaned over his monitor, tracing the fourth duplicate payment logged under a vendor that didn't technically exist. The spreadsheets were quiet things, cells and numbers, zeros and decimals, but to Milo, they shouted secrets. He sat in the cluttered analyst bullpen of Grayson Capital, a mid-sized financial services firm in the heart of Phoenix, Arizona. Not flashy like Wall Street, but established enough to make noise in regional investment circles. Milo, 29, was the quiet one. The one who brought his own lunch, skipped small talk, and never missed an inconsistency. That's why what he found in the Rothmere consolidated files bothered him. A strange loop of payments, millions in funds traveling through layered shell vendors, cycling through obscure accounts, some of which traced back to the same three routing numbers. The vendors had polished names, Pacific Nova, Lamont Holdings, but no websites, no registration data, no tax IDs. Something was wrong. He stared at the screen, the pattern blinking back at him like a Morse code of corruption. At 4:03 p.m., Milo printed a folder of sample transactions, careful not to include anything traceable to clients directly, and walked it up to the 27th floor, where his manager, Donovan Pratt, occupied a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and an espresso machine that cost more than Milo's car. "Hey Don," Milo said softly, knocking once. Donovan, a tall man in his 40s with perfectly gelled hair and a Rolex that flashed when he turned, waved him in with disinterest. "What's up, Ramirez?" Milo placed the folder on his desk. "Something's off in the Rothmere accounts. These transactions, same amount, same routing cycle, different vendor aliases. I think it might be laundering." Donovan flipped through a few pages. His expression didn't shift, but Milo noticed the tight grip on the folder's edge. After a few long seconds, Donovan shut it and leaned back in his chair. "Those accounts are above your clearance level," he said smoothly. "You've done your part. I'll take it from here. But..." "Milo." Donovan's voice dropped. "This isn't your concern anymore. Drop it." Milo nodded. Quietly. Respectfully. And then walked out. What Donovan didn't know was that Milo had already made backups. Ever since a hunch 3 weeks prior, Milo had been archiving questionable data to a secure personal drive. Not out of defiance, but out of instinct. His grandmother had taught him to always trust numbers. "People lie," she used to say, "but numbers whisper the truth to those patient enough to listen." She had raised him after his parents passed, a quiet woman with firm values and a green thumb. Milo had left their tiny home in rural New Mexico to study finance, not to chase wealth, but to prove people like him belonged in the rooms where big decisions were made. Now here he was, being quietly shown the door for noticing too much. The next morning, HR summoned him. A restructuring, they said. Budget cuts. Entire divisions were being reevaluated. They offered him a month's severance and asked him to pack his belongings. No one met his gaze as he walked out. The same co-workers who'd once praised his attention to detail were suddenly absorbed in their monitors. Milo didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just left. But before stepping into the elevator, he made one last stop, 3 floors down to the Risk and Compliance Department. He had spoken with Diana Cho, a senior compliance auditor, only once before, when she'd come up to his desk to verify a flagged transaction. "You've got a sharp eye," she had told him then, handing him her card. "If you ever notice something strange, bring it to me. Don't assume it's nothing." He rang her extension. She answered on the first ring. "Ramirez?" she said, surprised. "What's going on?" "I think I found something you should see." Diana's office was modest, bookshelves filled with legal codes, post-its dotting her computer monitor. Milo handed her the drive, along with a neatly labeled spreadsheet that mapped out every suspicious transaction, and the connections between shell vendors. As she flipped through the files, her brows furrowed. Then rose. Then flattened. "You realize keeping company financial data is a violation of your NDA, she said. "I do. And you were terminated. This could be spun as retaliation." "I know." Diana leaned back, studying him. "So why bring it to me?" Milo's voice didn't waver. "Because if someone's laundering money through this firm, and people know, it's not just unethical. It's criminal." She nodded, slowly. "I'll look into this," she said, sliding the drive into her desk. "But I can't promise protection, or results." "I'm not here for protection," Milo said. "I'm here because it's the right thing." That night, Milo didn't sleep. He walked the desert streets of Phoenix under the stars, replaying every scenario. What if Diana turned on him? What if the firm had more power than he realized? What if he was putting himself in danger? The answer came not in fear, but in clarity. He'd already lost his job. If he walked away now, he'd lose something more, his self-respect. So the next morning, he started documenting everything in detail, creating a timeline of events, a personal affidavit of what he'd seen, how he was fired, and the evidence he provided. Just in case. Because patterns didn't lie. And people who noticed them? They rarely walked away untouched. 2 days after handing over the evidence, Milo got the letter. Thick paper. No return address. A gold embossed G at the top, the Grayson capital emblem. Inside was a cease and desist order. Accusations: unauthorized possession of proprietary financial data. Breach of confidentiality. Attempted defamation. The tone was cordial. The message was not: return all data. Sign the retraction statement. Or face legal consequences. Milo read it twice. Then a third time. He wasn't surprised, but it still hit hard. That afternoon, a call came from an unknown number. He answered, already expecting a voice on the other end. "Milo," said Donovan Pratt, calm and almost apologetic, "we need to talk." Milo's grip on the phone tightened. "There's nothing left to discuss. You're making a mistake. This doesn't have to go nuclear. You're a valuable employee. You still could be. Is that a job offer, or blackmail?" Donovan's tone cooled. "Don't be naive. You've made yourself a problem. But problems can be solved, quietly. Don't throw your future away on this. You told me to drop it. I didn't." A pause. "Then you have no idea what you've stepped into." The call ended with a hollow click. Milo stared at his phone, his heart pounding. Not with fear, but with adrenaline. It was happening. The pressure. The power play. He needed help. So he called Amina Patel, an attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases. She ran a boutique law office known for representing the underdog, employees fired for speaking out against fraud, unsafe working conditions, or corporate corruption. Milo laid everything out. The data. The warning signs. The retaliation. Amina listened silently, scribbling notes in her leather-bound journal. When he finished, she leaned forward. "You're not imagining this," she said. "They're testing how far they can intimidate you into silence. What you did, retaining that data, was risky. But in whistleblower cases, it's not uncommon. And if what you've uncovered holds up, they've got much more to lose than you do." Milo exhaled slowly. "So, what happens now? We build your case. But we'll need more than transactions. We need proof your termination was retaliatory. Internal emails. Patterns of suppression. Anything that connects the dots. I don't work there anymore." Then we get creative. Milo moved out of his apartment that night. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. A black SUV had been idling across the street for hours. No plates. Windows tinted too dark. When he left to grab coffee earlier, it followed him 2 blocks. He packed what he needed and booked a motel on the outskirts of town under a fake name. He bought a burner phone. Backed up his evidence to 2 encrypted drives, one with him, one mailed to his cousin across the country. Somewhere between the stale motel sheets and the humming of an old AC unit, Milo's exhaustion hit him. He hadn't just lost his job. He'd entered a shadow war. And he was badly outnumbered. 3 days later, his phone buzzed. A message from Diana Cho. "I need to see you. Urgent. Not safe to talk here." They met in the backlot of an abandoned outlet store, Diana's idea. She arrived in a gray hoodie and dark sunglasses, far removed from the composed compliance officer he remembered. "I went digging," she said, handing him a slim USB drive. "Your Rothmere files?" "Just the tip." She showed him. 3 more clients. Same laundering pattern. Same shell vendors. But different handlers. "They've been running this for years," Diana said. "It's structured. Protected. Even executive signatures are masked. But I found one name that keeps recurring." "Who?" "Elliot Grayson." She paused. "Founder. Board chairman. The one who retired 2 years ago but still controls everything." Milo's mouth went dry. Elliot Grayson wasn't just a name, he was the name. The face of the firm. The reason clients signed checks without blinking. If he was involved, this wasn't just fraud. It was organized crime. Money laundering. Wire fraud. RICO-level conspiracy. "Why bring this to me?" Milo asked. "Because I can't go higher. Everyone above me is compromised." She hesitated. "And I'm scared." He believed her. Diana wasn't the type to rattle. But this was deeper than either of them thought. They couldn't fight it alone anymore. Milo went back to Amina. "We need protection," he said. "Not just legal. Federal." Amina's eyes narrowed. "You're saying this involves executives?" "I'm saying it involves Grayson himself." She tapped her pen against the table. "Then we escalate." The next morning, they contacted the Office of the Inspector General and filed a formal whistleblower complaint through the Securities and Exchange Commission. But that wasn't enough. Through an old contact, Amina arranged a confidential meeting with Agent Luis Caro of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The meeting took place in a secure office inside a generic federal building miles outside Phoenix. Agent Caro was quiet, bearded, and wore jeans with his blazer. But the moment Milo started explaining, the agent's expression sharpened. "We've had eyes on Rothmere for months," he said. "But this fills in the gaps." He turned to Milo. "You understand that moving forward means testifying. Court appearances. Maybe a public unmasking." "I do. You could be targeted." "I already have been." Caro leaned back. "Then let's bring the house down." That night, back at his motel, Milo stared at the ceiling. The ceiling fan spun slowly, its hum like a countdown ticking toward something irreversible. He'd set this in motion. He couldn't stop now. But he had one final move to make. He opened his laptop. Created a folder labeled "If I Disappear." Inside, he placed copies of every document. A letter to Amina. A voice memo to his grandmother. And one last note. "The numbers always tell the truth. So will I." The raid came on a Thursday morning, under a cloudless Arizona sky. At exactly 9:17 a.m., federal agents entered Grayson Capital from 3 separate entrances. Their jackets bore the blocky letters of the FBI, and their steps were precise, urgent, but calm, like they had rehearsed this a dozen times. The front lobby froze. Clients holding lattes mid-sip. Analysts halfway through morning meetings. Phones ringing unanswered. By 9:23, elevators had been locked. Computer systems seized. All cell signals within the building jammed. The financial empire Milo had once quietly sat inside, churning numbers, flagging small errors, was now at the center of a national criminal investigation. Milo watched from across the street, inside a nondescript SUV with Agent Caro in the passenger seat beside him. "See that?" the agent murmured, pointing toward the glass-walled corner office on the top floor. That's where Elliot Grayson liked to play kingmaker. Through the tinted window, they could just make out Donovan Pratt, no longer composed, no longer in control, being led away by 2 agents. His perfectly groomed hair was disheveled, his shirt untucked, his lips moving fast. "Already talking," Caro said with mild contempt. "He started the moment we showed him the warrant." Milo said nothing. He wasn't sure what emotion to feel. Relief? Triumph? Vengeance? Instead, he just watched, quiet, still, as the machine that had once chewed him up began to implode. By mid-afternoon, news trucks were circling the downtown block. Breaking: FBI raids Grayson Capital in major money laundering probe. The headlines were everywhere. TV anchors speculated. Financial analysts guessed. But none of them had the full story, not yet. Not like Milo. Back in the federal field office, he and Diana were debriefed separately. Diana had agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity, and her testimony added more pieces to the puzzle: emails, meeting minutes, internal memos that hinted at a growing, deliberate concealment effort inside Grayson's upper management. Agent Caro's team had been building their case for almost a year. Milo's evidence gave them the map. The Rothmere consolidated files were just the start. 3 other accounts, all high-value client portfolios, had been used to funnel money through offshore holdings, using shell corporations and false invoices. Some of those funds tied back to real estate projects in Dubai, others to accounts linked to former political officials under international investigation. It was global. Dirty. And deep. At the center of it all? Elliot Grayson. Retired publicly. But still approving high-level activity behind the scenes. And when agents searched his home that evening, they found exactly what they were hoping for: a locked file cabinet filled with handwritten ledgers. Old school. Untraceable unless discovered. But now fully in evidence. Back in Milo's motel room that night, Diana showed up at his door. Not in disguise this time. No hoodie. No sunglasses. Just her normal blazer and tired eyes. "They've arrested 5 executives," she said. "And the FBI issued a freeze on Grayson's assets. Every account flagged in your spreadsheet is now part of a federal asset seizure." Milo sat down on the edge of the bed. "And Grayson himself? Indicted this morning. Multiple counts, Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Do they have him? Not yet. His plane left the country 3 days ago. FBI's working with Interpol. Milo let out a slow breath. He knew it was coming. Probably. But his name's all over those ledgers. Silence passed between them. Then Diana pulled something from her bag, a slim white envelope. "What's that?" Milo asked. She smiled faintly. "A letter. From my father. He was a compliance officer in the 80s. Whistleblew on a brokerage firm in New York. They buried him in litigation, but he stood by it. I never thought I'd follow in his footsteps." She paused. "Until I saw how they treated you." Milo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you, for not staying silent." Diana looked at him. "You did the hard part," she said. "You were the first domino." 2 weeks later, the DOJ made it official. A press conference. Flags. A row of microphones. This investigation has revealed a deliberate and sustained campaign of financial crime within Grayson Capital, orchestrated by its most senior executives. Thanks to the bravery of internal whistleblowers, we were able to expose this network and begin the process of holding those responsible accountable. Milo's name was not mentioned publicly, but in private? The DOJ made it clear, his work, his persistence, had been instrumental. And then came the letter from the SEC whistleblower program. He opened it alone in his newly rented apartment. "Based on the evidence provided and its direct contribution to enforcement actions, you are entitled to a financial award totaling 17% of recovered civil penalties." The number made his eyes blur. It wasn't why he'd done it. But it was enough to pay off every loan, buy a modest home, and never again work in a place where integrity came second to silence. A month after the raid, Milo sat at a cafe near a university campus, sipping black coffee and reviewing a quarterly report for a tech startup he'd been consulting with. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me. Are you Milo Ramirez?" He looked up. A young woman stood there, early 20s, uncertain, holding a notepad. "I just started in compliance over at Riverview Capital. My supervisor said I should talk to you. That you might have insight." Milo set down his coffee, gestured to the chair across from him. "Sure," he said, smiling gently. "I've got a story or two." And so he began again. Not just an analyst now, not just a survivor, but someone reshaping the very culture he'd once feared. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't shouting. It's refusing to look away. The dust didn't settle so much as shift. In the weeks following the Grayson Capital collapse, headlines came fast and hot. The national news labeled it one of the most sophisticated financial crimes in a decade. Panels of experts debated how such a network went unnoticed for so long. Business schools updated their case studies. Regulators rewrote compliance procedures. But for Milo Ramirez, the storm had a quieter echo. He sat in a small home on the eastern edge of Phoenix, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the faint smell of fresh paint. A single cactus stood in the window, soaking in the light, his grandmother's favorite kind of plant. Hardy. Quiet. Unapologetically resilient. The whistleblower reward had changed his circumstances, but not him. After taxes and lawyer fees, it was enough to breathe without the panic of rent or car payments. Enough to buy this house outright and stock the fridge with something besides microwave noodles. But peace didn't come from money. It came from choice. From knowing he had won now. For the first time in years, Milo could say no to anything that didn't align with his values. No to toxic office politics. No to cultures of silence. No to bosses who used power like a leash. And that was exactly what he did. He turned down 3 job offers in the first 2 weeks. All from firms that spoke about ethics like a PR slogan. One of them even hinted that they admired his tenacity but would prefer someone who avoided attracting attention. He deleted the email mid-sentence. Instead, Milo said yes to something different, consulting. A small but rapidly growing fintech startup, Clarity Metrics, approached him with a unique proposal. "We don't just want your skills," the CEO told him during a Zoom call. "We want your perspective. Your spine." Milo joined as their lead compliance advisor. The work wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets, training modules, policy documents, internal audits. But it was honest. Clean. Transparent. He helped design systems that could spot what he once found buried in the dirt. Helped build a culture where junior analysts were rewarded, not punished, for asking hard questions. And as word spread about his role in the Grayson takedown, others began to reach out. A quiet trickle of messages. "I think I saw something similar in my firm. How did you know it was time to speak up?" Would you look at this file and tell me what you see? He never offered legal advice. Never told anyone what to do. But he listened. He listened the way no one had listened to him. And soon, people began calling him not just an analyst, but a guardian. It was strange. The same quietness that once made him invisible now made others trust him. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He simply didn't flinch. On the legal front, things moved steadily. Elliot Grayson was still missing. Interpol believed he'd fled to Eastern Europe under a false identity. But his name had been stripped from every building and document related to the firm he once ruled. Donovan Pratt had taken a plea deal. His testimony, combined with Diana's and Milo's, sealed the fate of 3 other executives. All of them faced prison time, financial penalties, and public disgrace. A class action lawsuit from defrauded clients was underway. The firm itself? Liquidated. Assets seized. Legacy erased. Milo never returned to that building. He didn't need to. In a strange way, watching it crumble from afar was enough. Not for revenge, but for closure. And Diana? She was thriving. She'd been offered a position at a national regulatory firm and moved to D.C., where she now trained auditors on how to spot high-level laundering schemes. They stayed in touch, regular calls, rare but genuine. Trevor, the other former analyst who'd helped them connect the final dots, had gone off-grid. Last Milo heard, he was living in Oregon, doing cybersecurity for a clean energy startup. They'd all taken their scars and built something better. One evening, sitting on the back porch with a glass of wine, Milo got a call. Unknown number. He hesitated. Then picked up. Mr. Ramirez? Yes. This is Agent Luis Caro. Thought you'd want to know. Interpol detained a man at a border checkpoint in Austria. Fake passport. Fingerprints matched Elliot Grayson. Milo sat up straighter. He's in custody? Officially, yes. Extradition will take time. But the net's closed. Milo didn't speak for a long moment. Then said softly, "Thank you. You did good, Ramirez," Caro said. "A lot of people owed money, betrayed, buried, you helped give them a shot at justice." After the call ended, Milo sat in silence. Not the empty kind. The full kind. Months passed. And then, one day, Clarity Metrics sent him to speak at a financial ethics summit. Not on behalf of the FBI. Not to relive the raid. Just to share what he'd learned. He walked on stage to a modest crowd of industry professionals, some young, some hardened by decades in finance. His PowerPoint had only one slide. Integrity doesn't make you popular. It makes you unbreakable. For 30 minutes, Milo told them a story. Not about Grayson or shell companies. But about listening. About the voice in your gut that says, "This doesn't feel right." About not looking away. Afterward, a dozen people approached him. Some just wanted to shake his hand. Some wanted advice. But one woman, a compliance officer in her 50s, said something he would never forget. "You made me brave again." That night, Milo returned to his house. He watered the cactus in the window. Cooked himself dinner. Watched the news. And as the sun dipped behind the Phoenix skyline, he finally smiled. He hadn't just escaped corruption. He had helped break it. Piece by piece. Pattern by pattern. Page by page. It began with numbers. That's what Milo Ramirez thought, sitting at the edge of the lecture hall as students filed in, notebooks in hand, voices buzzing. The space smelled like dry erase markers and stale coffee. A familiar kind of academic tension hung in the air, somewhere between anxiety and ambition. Guest speaker today, the professor announced. Some of you might have read about him. A few heads turned toward Milo, sitting near the lectern in his usual dark blazer, his expression unreadable. But inside, he felt peace. Not pride. Not arrogance. Just peace. It had been almost a year since the raid on Grayson Capital. Since shell corporations collapsed like dominoes and fake invoices were dragged into the light. Since Milo had gone from being a quiet analyst with too many questions to a whistleblower whose courage had reshaped a system. The legal proceedings were still grinding on. Elliot Grayson had been extradited and now sat in a federal holding facility awaiting trial. More than a dozen other individuals across multiple industries, political consultants, bankers, offshore brokers, had been indicted as the investigation spread. But Milo's part? His testimony was done. His cooperation complete. Now, he lived differently. He had joined Clarity Metrics full-time as their head of compliance strategy. The role allowed him to blend data science, ethics training, and advisory work across multiple companies. Startups. Nonprofits. Investment firms hoping to build credibility in a post-Grayson world. And occasionally, he was invited to speak. Not because he was famous, but because he was living proof. Proof that you could say no to power and not be crushed. That you could make it out, not untouched, but not broken either. Milo stepped up to the front of the room. He didn't use notes. "I'm not here to talk about Grayson," he began. "I'm here to talk about the thing no one teaches you in school: silence is contagious. And if you don't learn how to confront it, you'll catch it, too." The room quieted. He told them how it started, with a small mismatch in a spreadsheet. A vendor without a phone number. A pattern that didn't feel accidental. He talked about instincts, and how you learn to trust them the same way you learn to read data, through repetition. "But here's the truth," he continued. "What I found wasn't remarkable. What I did next. That was the hard part." He told them about Diana. About Trevor. About the late-night motel rooms and legal threats. About the black SUV. About the weight of knowing, and the cost of speaking. He paused before the final slide. "Some of you will work in places where fraud is a shadow hiding in the corner. Some of you will never see it. But some of you will. And when you do, I hope you remember that silence protects the wrong people." Then he said what his grandmother once told him. "People lie. Numbers whisper. But it's your job to listen." After the lecture, a few students stayed behind. One young man, jittery and pale, hovered awkwardly near the podium. "Mr. Ramirez?" he asked. "Could I show you something?" Milo nodded. The student pulled out his laptop and opened a file, an expense sheet from a summer internship at a mid-size firm. "I noticed this pattern. It's probably nothing. But the numbers." Milo leaned over, scanning. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. He didn't react. Just pointed gently. "Follow that routing number. If it loops, trace the vendor. See if they have a physical office or just a mailbox." The student nodded, frantically typing. Milo gave him his email. "Let me know what you find." As the student walked off, Milo glanced once more at the spreadsheet. It had begun again. And that was the thing about corruption: when one system falls, others rise to take its place. That's why people like him had to keep watching. Not for the spotlight. Not for revenge. But for prevention. For the future. Back home that evening, Milo pulled into his driveway just as the sun dipped behind the saguaros in his yard. The air was dry, the sky streaked orange and violet. His dog, a rescue mutt named Finch, barked at the door as he stepped inside. He dropped his keys in the bowl. Opened a chilled bottle of water. Sat on the back porch, where the evening was still and warm. There was a letter waiting in his inbox. From the Department of Justice. The subject line: Final Disbursement, SEC Enforcement Action. Milo opened it. Scanned it. Smiled. The total reward had been recalculated after the second round of civil penalties. It was more than he'd expected. Enough for a scholarship fund. Or seed money for a foundation. He hadn't decided yet. But he would. He had time. And that was the greatest reward of all: not money, not recognition. Time. Time to make better systems. Time to help others. Time to breathe. Months later, Milo stood at his grandmother's grave. A soft desert wind rustled the wild grass along the cemetery fence. He knelt down and placed a tiny figurine beside her stone, a miniature calculator she used to keep by her bed. Numbers written on yellowing paper still inside. "I didn't walk away," he whispered. "You'd have been proud." And for a moment, he felt her there. In the quiet. In the clarity. In the simple fact that, because he had listened to what the numbers whispered, because he refused to look away, he had changed something. Maybe not the whole world. But enough of it.